Welcome to Elevated Within. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch and grow with us today. If you find value in exploring the depths of the human mind and unlocking your true potential, please take a brief moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is what allows us to continue bringing you these deep dives into personal growth and self-mastery. We all want to be disciplined. We all have that crystal clear vision in our minds of the ideal version of ourselves. That version of you wakes up early without hitting snooze, exercises consistently, eats perfectly, reads profound books instead of mindlessly scrolling through social media, and pursues long-term goals with relentless focus. In our minds, this ideal self operates with machine-like precision. But then reality sets in. We wake up tired. The couch looks incredibly comfortable. The junk food is right there in the pantry. And the work we promised ourselves we would finish suddenly feels like an insurmountable mountain. Often, despite our absolute best intentions, we just do not do the things we know we should do. Why does this happen? Why is there such a massive gap between our intentions and our actions? Why does our brain fiercely resist the very things that are objectively good for us? For a long time, society has given us a very simple and very flawed answer to this question. We are told that we just lack willpower. We are told that if we cannot stick to a diet, or build a business, or learn a new language, it is a moral failing. We are told we are lazy or weak, and that the only solution is to white-knuckle our way through life, forcing ourselves to endure suffering in the present for the promise of a reward in the future. But if you have ever tried to rely purely on sheer willpower, you already know the truth. It is exhausting. Willpower is a battery, and every time you force yourself to do something you hate, or resist something you crave, that battery drains. By the end of a long, stressful day, your willpower battery is completely empty, and that is exactly when the bad habits take over. This creates a cycle of enthusiasm, followed by exhaustion, followed by guilt. It is a terrible way to live, and more importantly, it simply does not work for long-term change. But what if we have been looking at this entirely the wrong way? What if the problem is not you, but the strategy you are using? What if discipline was not about brute force, punishment, or endless willpower? What if, instead, it was about clever psychological architecture? What if you could actually trick your own brain into not just tolerating discipline, but genuinely liking it? This might sound impossible. We are so conditioned to believe that discipline must be painful. But the truth is, the most highly productive and disciplined people in the world do not rely on superhuman willpower. They rely on systems. They understand the mechanics of human behavior, and they use that understanding to design a life where doing the right thing becomes the easiest, most natural default option. In this series, we are going to completely deconstruct the psychology of habit formation, drawing heavily from the groundbreaking concepts presented by James Clear in his phenomenal book, Atomic Habits. But we are going to go beyond just summarizing the book. We are going to dig deep into the philosophical and psychological underpinnings of why we act the way we do. We are going to look at the friction that exists between our ancient, survival-driven neurobiology and the demands of our complex modern world. This journey is not about turning you into a rigid, emotionless robot. It is exactly the opposite. It is about deep self-understanding. It is about realizing that your brain is incredibly efficient, but it is operating on old software. Your mind naturally seeks to conserve energy, avoid pain, and acquire instant gratification. That was a brilliant survival mechanism 10,000 years ago, but today, it is the exact mechanism that keeps you stuck. Instead of fighting a brutal, unwinnable war against your own nature, we are going to learn how to work with it. We are going to learn how to speak the language of your brain's reward system. Over the course of this video, you will discover that the path to extraordinary results is not paved with massive, sweeping life overhauls that burn you out in a week. It is built on small, nearly invisible, incremental changes. We will explore how to stop obsessing over the final goal and start falling in love with the system. We will dive into the profound shift of identity-based habits, where you stop focusing on what you want to achieve and start focusing on who you wish to become. Prepare to have your perspective shifted. The strategies we are about to cover are surprisingly simple yet profoundly effective. You are going to learn how to make the hard things easy, the boring things attractive, and the invisible habits obvious. You are not lazy. You just have not designed your environment and your systems effectively yet. Let us begin the process of rewiring your reality, tricking your brain into craving discipline, and finally aligning your daily actions with your deepest ambitions. To truly understand why we struggle so profoundly with discipline, we must first travel back in time and examine the ancient machinery operating inside our own heads. The human brain is a marvel of biological engineering, but it is important to remember that it did not evolve to help you build a profitable business, learn to code, or maintain a perfectly healthy diet. Your brain evolved in an environment of extreme scarcity and constant physical danger. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors roamed the savannah with one primary directive: survive until tomorrow. In that harsh environment, the brain developed a highly sophisticated operating system based on three core principles: conserve energy, seek calories, and prioritize immediate, short-term rewards. Think about this deeply. Laziness, which we now condemn as a moral failing, was once a brilliant survival mechanism. If you expended energy unnecessarily in a world where food was scarce, you died. If you stumbled upon a source of high-calorie, sugary fruit, your brain demanded that you eat as much of it as possible, right then and there, because it might be gone tomorrow. Your neurobiology was perfectly tuned to value the immediate present over the distant future. The profound problem we face today is an evolutionary mismatch. Our environment has changed at a blinding speed over the last few centuries, but our biological hardware has remained exactly the same. We are navigating a complex modern world, filled with abstract, long-term goals like retirement planning, career advancement, and physical fitness, using an ancient brain that is constantly scanning the horizon for immediate gratification and desperately trying to conserve energy. When you feel a massive wall of resistance to sitting down and doing deep work, you are not broken. You are simply experiencing your survival instincts misfiring in the modern world. Your brain is telling you that the couch is safe, resting conserves energy, and the difficult task is a threat to your immediate comfort. At the center of this biological tug-of-war is your brain's reward system, heavily governed by a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Dopamine is widely misunderstood. Most people think of it simply as the pleasure chemical, the hit of joy you get when you eat a piece of chocolate or see a notification on your phone. But neuroscientists know that dopamine is far more powerful than that. It is the molecule of motivation. It is the chemical of desire and anticipation. Dopamine is released not just when you experience a reward, but when you anticipate one. It is the driving force that compels you to act. In our modern world, our dopamine systems are constantly being hijacked. We are surrounded by supernormal stimuli, highly engineered junk food, bottomless social media feeds, and endless streaming entertainment. The modern world offers cheap, artificial dopamine, and discipline requires delayed gratification. Your brain naturally gravitates toward the path of least resistance and highest immediate reward. Understanding this neurobiology completely destroys the great myth of willpower. For generations, we have been sold the lie that discipline is simply a matter of wanting it badly enough. We are told that we just need to grit our teeth, dig deep, and force ourselves to do the things we hate. But willpower is not a magical, infinite force. Psychological research strongly suggests that willpower functions very much like a muscle. It has a limited capacity, and it experiences fatigue. Every time you make a difficult decision, every time you suppress an emotion, and every time you force yourself to resist a temptation, you drain a little bit of your willpower battery. By the end of a long, stressful workday, when your cognitive load has been heavy and your energy is depleted, your willpower is essentially gone. And that is precisely the moment when you skip the gym, order takeout, and collapse onto the sofa. Relying on brute force willpower to achieve your goals is a fundamentally flawed strategy. It is like trying to hold back the ocean tide with a bucket. Eventually, you will fail, and when you do, the resulting guilt will only make the cycle worse. This is where the transformative philosophy of James Clear's Atomic Habits comes into play. If willpower is a finite resource, and our brains are wired to resist difficult, long-term tasks, we need a completely different approach. We have to stop relying on motivation and start relying on systems. The core premise of the atomic philosophy is the power of small, incremental, almost invisible changes. We are obsessed with massive transformations. We think that to change our lives, we need to take massive, exhausting action. But the math of self-improvement tells a different story. If you can get just 1% better each day for 1 year, you will end up 37 times better by the time you are done. The reverse is also true. A 1% decline every day compounds into a near-zero baseline. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. To achieve this, we must make a profound shift. We must focus on systems over goals. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. If you are an entrepreneur, your goal might be to build $1 million business. Your system is how you test product ideas, manage your daily schedule, and connect with clients. Goals are good for setting a direction, but systems are what actually dictate your progress. Interestingly, winners and losers in any domain often have the exact same goals. Every Olympian wants the gold medal. The goal does not differentiate them. The system does. When you fall in love with the process rather than the product, you do not have to wait to give yourself permission to be happy. You can be satisfied anytime your system is running. But perhaps the deepest and most profound psychological shift is moving toward identity-based habits. Most people start the process of changing their habits by focusing on what they want to achieve. This leads to outcome-based habits. The alternative is to build identity-based habits. With this approach, we start by focusing on who we wish to become. True behavior change is actually identity change. You might start a habit because of motivation, but the only reason you will stick with it is that it becomes part of your identity. It is one thing to say, I am the type of person who wants to write a book. It is something very different to say, I am a writer. When your behavior and your identity are fully aligned, you are no longer pursuing behavior change. You are simply acting like the type of person you already believe yourself to be. To bridge this gap between who we are and who we want to be, without fighting a losing battle against our own neurobiology, we must utilize a framework that speaks directly to the brain's ancient operating system. This framework consists of the 4 laws of behavior change. If you want to build a good habit, you must make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. These 4 laws offer a simple set of rules for creating good behaviors and breaking bad ones. We are going to explore each of these laws in deep detail, unpacking the psychological mechanisms that make them work. We will deconstruct your daily environment, analyze your hidden cravings, eliminate the invisible friction holding you back, and learn how to manufacture the satisfying rewards your brain so desperately seeks. Instead of fighting your brain, we will learn to work with it. The process of behavior change always starts with awareness. Before a habit can be formed, before discipline can even enter the equation, your brain must recognize a cue. A cue is a trigger that tells your brain to initiate a behavior. It is a piece of information that predicts a reward. Our prehistoric ancestors spent their days scanning the environment for cues signaling primary rewards like food and shelter. Today, we spend our time anticipating secondary rewards like money, status, and personal satisfaction. Because our brains are prediction machines continuously scanning our surroundings, the first step to tricking your brain into liking discipline is to master the first law of behavior change. Make it obvious. The most powerful tool for making your cues obvious is environment design. We like to believe we are in complete control of our choices, that our behavior is simply a product of conscious desire. But the truth is, the invisible hand of our environment shapes human behavior far more than we realize. If you want to drink more water, but your refrigerator is full of soda, your willpower will eventually break. If you want to practice guitar, but it is tucked away in the back of your closet, you are placing enormous friction between yourself and the desired habit. Environment design is about taking back control and becoming the architect of your surroundings. If you want to exercise in the morning, lay out your workout clothes and shoes right next to your bed the night before. If you want to eat healthier, place a bowl of apples in the center of the kitchen counter, and put the junk food completely out of sight. Make the cues for your good habits wildly obvious and directly in your line of sight. Visual cues are the catalyst for this transformation. We are highly visual creatures, with a huge portion of the brain dedicated to processing sight. When you use visual reminders, you hijack your brain's processing power. A sticky note on your mirror or a habit tracker on your refrigerator are not just reminders. They are environmental triggers demanding your attention. By making the invisible visible, you reduce the cognitive load required to remember your goals. You do not have to think about being disciplined. Your environment simply commands it. Another profoundly effective strategy is habit stacking. This concept takes advantage of the interconnected nature of human behavior. You rarely perform an action in isolation. Each action becomes a cue that triggers the next. Going to the bathroom leads to washing your hands, which leads to drying them. Habit stacking uses this natural momentum. You identify a habit you already do each day and stack your new behavior directly on top of it. The formula is simple. After I complete my current habit, I will perform my new habit. After I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. After I take off my work shoes, I will immediately change into my workout gear. You use the established neural pathways of old routines to build the foundation for new ones. There is also a fascinating psychological phenomenon that can amplify your ability to start these habits, known as the fresh start effect. Research shows human beings experience a surge in motivation when they encounter a temporal landmark, like a new week, a new month, a birthday, or returning from vacation. These landmarks create a psychological separation between our past, flawed self and our future, ideal self. They offer a clean slate. Intentionally linking a new habit to a fresh start can provide the exact burst of psychological energy needed to break the inertia of old routines. But making a habit obvious is only the first piece of the puzzle. Once your brain recognizes the cue, it must actually want to perform the action. This brings us to the second law of behavior change. Make it attractive. To trick our brains into liking discipline, we must learn how to manipulate our own cravings. Craving is the motivational force behind every habit. Without desire, we have no reason to act. To make discipline attractive, we can use temptation bundling. This works by linking an action you want to do with an action you need to do, leveraging a psychological concept which states that more probable behaviors will reinforce less probable behaviors. If you love listening to a specific podcast but hate doing cardio, create a strict rule. You are only allowed to listen to that podcast while on the treadmill. You take a highly anticipated reward and bundle it tightly with a difficult task. Over time, your brain associates the difficult task with the dopamine release of the reward. You are literally conditioning yourself to crave the treadmill because it is the only path to the podcast. We must also acknowledge the profound impact of social influence. Humans are deeply tribal creatures. Evolutionarily, being separated from the tribe meant certain death, so our brains are heavily wired to fit in and earn the approval of our peers. We naturally imitate the habits of those around us. If you are surrounded by people who avoid hard work, you will naturally find those behaviors attractive to fit in. But if you immerse yourself in a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior, your perception shifts. Joining a community of driven individuals or finding an accountability partner transforms discipline from a lonely struggle into a shared tribal value, making the hard work incredibly attractive. Perhaps the most elegant way to make discipline attractive is through the simple act of reframing. Our words create our reality. When we think about difficult tasks, we often use the language of burden. We say, I have to wake up early or I have to go to the gym. This language programs our brain to view these activities as obligations and sources of suffering. The psychological hack is to change a single word. Shift have to get to. I get to wake up early and work on my dreams. I get to go to the gym and build a resilient body. This subtle cognitive shift transforms a burden into an opportunity, moving your focus from the friction of the task to the benefit of the outcome. The power of this mental shift is supported by a mind-bending phenomenon known as the placebo effect on motivation. In a famous study, researchers looked at hotel maids who spent all day doing physically demanding work but did not perceive themselves as getting exercise. The researchers simply informed half the maids that their daily work met the requirements for an active lifestyle, explaining the calories burned. A month later, those maids showed a decrease in weight, blood pressure, and body fat compared to the control group. Their behavior had not changed, but their perception had. Simply believing that an activity was an attractive, beneficial form of exercise literally changed their physiological response to it. When you reframe your discipline, believing it is a positive force, your brain and body will follow. Once we have engineered our environment to make the cues for our habits glaringly obvious, and we have reframed our mindset to make the action itself deeply attractive, we run into the reality of execution. This is where most people fail. They have the right trigger, they have the desire, but the action itself feels too mountainous. This brings us to the third law of behavior change, which is to make it easy. To understand why this law is so critical, we have to revisit the fundamental nature of human biology. As we discussed earlier, the human brain is an energy conservation machine. By default, it will always gravitate toward the path of least resistance. In physics, there is a concept called activation energy, which is the minimum amount of energy required to start a chemical reaction. Human behavior works exactly the same way. Every single habit requires a certain amount of activation energy. The harder the task, the more energy is required. If the activation energy is too high, your brain will simply refuse to initiate the action, no matter how much you logically want the final result. The secret to tricking your brain into discipline is not to force yourself to overcome massive amounts of friction, but to ruthlessly eliminate the friction entirely. If you want to eat a healthy diet, but you have to spend an hour chopping vegetables and cooking after a long, exhausting day of work, the friction is incredibly high. Your brain will choose the fast food delivery app every single time because it requires zero effort. But if you spend a couple of hours on Sunday preparing your meals for the entire week, you have reduced the daily friction to zero. All you have to do is open the refrigerator and heat up the food. The healthy choice becomes the path of least resistance. This philosophy leads us directly to one of the most powerful psychological tools in existence, known as the 2-minute rule. When you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to complete. The idea is to scale down any new behavior until it is so incredibly easy that you cannot possibly say no to it. Reading an entire philosophical book before bed becomes reading one single page. Doing a grueling 45-minute workout becomes putting on your gym shoes and doing one single push-up. Organizing your entire house becomes folding one pair of socks. Most people fiercely resist this idea. They think that doing one push-up is pointless and a waste of time. But they are missing the entire point of the strategy. The goal is not to get a perfectly sculpted body from one push-up. The goal is to master the art of showing up. A habit must be established before it can be optimized. Once you have established the neurological pathway of starting, momentum takes over. It is much easier to keep reading once you have opened the book. We must also protect our energy by eliminating decision fatigue. Every single day, you wake up with a finite amount of decision-making power. Every choice you make, from what to wear, to what to eat, to what emails to answer, drains a tiny bit of that cognitive battery. By the time you need to make a difficult choice about your discipline in the evening, your prefrontal cortex is completely exhausted. The antidote to decision fatigue is routine and automation. When you automate your life, you outsource your discipline to technology. To build visual momentum and make the process incredibly easy to track, you can use what is widely known as the Seinfeld strategy. The legendary comedian Jerry Seinfeld famously used a massive wall calendar to build his daily writing habit. Every day that he sat down and wrote a new joke, he would draw a giant red X over that day on the calendar. After a few days, he had a chain. At that point, his only goal was to not break the chain. He did not focus on whether the joke was brilliant or terrible. He only focused on the visual evidence of his consistency. This perfectly taps into our brain's inherent desire for completion and momentum. But making a habit easy only guarantees that you will do it once or twice. If you want to trick your brain into repeating the behavior day after day, year after year, you must master the fourth and final law of behavior change, which is to make it satisfying. The cardinal rule of behavior change is simple. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. Our brains evolved in an immediate return environment. When our ancestors found food, the reward was immediate. When they escaped a predator, the reward was immediate. But modern society is a delayed return environment. You work today, but you do not get your paycheck for 2 weeks. You go to the gym today, but you do not see physical changes for months. You save money today, but you do not get to retire for decades. The human brain completely struggles with this delay. It prioritizes instant gratification over long-term payoff. To build lasting discipline, we have to hack this system by artificially attaching an immediate reward to our delayed return habits. This is where tracking your progress becomes absolutely essential. A habit tracker is not just a visual cue. It is an immediate form of emotional satisfaction. The simple, physical act of crossing an item off your to-do list or filling in a square on a calendar releases a tiny, powerful hit of dopamine. Provides concrete, undeniable evidence that you are moving forward. This positive reinforcement is critical. You must consciously celebrate your small wins. We are so socially conditioned to only celebrate the massive milestones, like losing 50 pounds or making $1 million. But waiting for those massive milestones starves your brain of the dopamine it needs to keep going during the difficult middle phases. By acknowledging and celebrating the simple fact that you showed up and did the work today, you are actively wiring your brain to associate the difficult task with a feeling of victory. Ultimately, the most profound reward you can give yourself is an identity-based reward. As we discussed earlier, the ultimate goal of habit change is not to achieve a specific outcome, but to become a specific type of person. Every time you perform a disciplined action, you are casting a vital vote for the person you want to become. The true reward is the internal satisfaction of integrity. The reward is looking in the mirror and knowing that your daily actions perfectly align with your deepest values. When you finish a grueling workout, the immediate reward is not a transformed body. The immediate reward is the absolute certainty that you are a resilient, highly disciplined human being. This deeply connects to a fascinating psychological principle known as the endowment effect. The endowment effect states that human beings place a significantly higher value on things simply because they own them. We see this all the time with physical objects, but it applies perfectly to our habits and our streaks. When you build a streak of waking up early for 30 consecutive days, you begin to take psychological ownership of that streak. It becomes a part of your mental property. Because of the endowment effect, the thought of losing that streak feels like a painful, visceral loss. Your brain, which naturally wants to avoid loss at all costs, will suddenly generate the exact motivation you need to get out of bed on the 31st day. You have successfully tricked your brain into fiercely protecting the very discipline it used to resist. Up to this point, we have focused entirely on the positive side of the equation. We have explored how to construct a psychological environment that nurtures and accelerates the growth of good habits. But to truly master your mind and achieve lasting discipline, you must understand the dark side of this behavioral machinery. The exact same neurological laws that build incredible, life-changing habits are also responsible for the destructive, soul-crushing routines that hold you back. Your brain does not possess a moral compass. It does not inherently know the difference between a good habit and a bad one. It only understands cues, cravings, responses, and rewards. Therefore, to eliminate undiscipline and eradicate the behaviors that are sabotaging your potential, we must learn how to invert the system. We must take the 4 laws of behavior change and completely reverse them. The first step in breaking a bad habit is to make it completely invisible. As we discussed earlier, every habit is initiated by a cue. Most people believe that the key to breaking a bad habit is absolute, ironclad self-control. We think that if we are just strong enough, we can stare temptation in the face and say no. But psychological research paints a very different picture. The people with the highest levels of self-control are not the ones who constantly resist temptation. They are the ones who design their lives so they rarely have to use self-control in the first place. Once a habit is deeply formed, the cue will almost always trigger the craving. You cannot magically erase the craving, but you can absolutely eliminate the cue. If you are wasting hours every night scrolling endlessly on your phone, you must remove the device from your bedroom. If you are struggling with your diet, you cannot keep highly processed, sugary foods in your pantry. If the visual trigger is not there, the neurological sequence is never initiated. You must ruthlessly scrub your environment clean of the triggers that prompt your unwanted behaviors. Out of sight literally translates to out of mind. The second law of breaking a bad habit is to make it deeply unattractive. Every behavior we engage in addresses a deeper, underlying motive. You do not crave a glass of alcohol, or an hour of mindless television, or an endless social media feed purely for the sake of it. You crave the underlying shift in state. You crave stress relief, or social connection, or an escape from anxiety. The problem is that we have falsely associated destructive habits with the solution to our underlying needs. To make a bad habit unattractive, you must completely reframe your mindset and highlight the brutal, undeniable negative consequences of the action. You must expose the lie your brain is constantly telling you. That junk food is not a reward for a hard day of work. It is a chemical cocktail that will drain your energy and damage your long-term health. That hour of scrolling is not resting. It is actively fracturing your attention span and stealing your precious time. By consciously dwelling on the negative impacts of your bad habits and repeating these truths to yourself, you can strip away the artificial allure and reveal the behavior for what it truly is: a massive barrier to your ultimate potential. The third step is to make the bad habit incredibly difficult. If the secret to good habits is reducing friction to zero, the secret to destroying bad habits is building an insurmountable wall of friction. You must increase the number of steps between you and the destructive behavior. If you want to stop watching so much television, unplug the television and take the batteries out of the remote after every single use. Better yet, move the television to a completely different room. If you want to stop getting distracted by specific websites while you are trying to do deep, meaningful work, install a strict website blocker that physically prevents you from accessing them. The goal is to make the activation energy required to perform the bad habit so exhaustingly high that your brain simply gives up and chooses a more productive path. By forcing yourself to work incredibly hard just to engage in a bad habit, you break the cycle of mindless consumption. Finally, the fourth law of breaking a bad habit is to make it profoundly unsatisfying. As we established, the brain repeats behaviors that are immediately rewarded. Conversely, it avoids behaviors that are immediately punished. The deadly trap of most bad habits is that the reward is immediate, while the ultimate consequence is severely delayed. Eating a donut provides an instant sugar rush, but the weight gain and lethargy is a slow, gradual process. Procrastinating provides instant relief, but the missed deadline is weeks away. To break this cycle, you must artificially drag the long-term consequence into the present moment. The pain of the bad habit must be felt immediately. This is where the concept of a commitment device becomes a formidable weapon in your arsenal. A commitment device is a choice you make in the present that controls your actions in the future. It is a way of locking your future self into a disciplined path. This could mean leaving your credit cards at home when you go out so you literally cannot make an impulse purchase, or buying food in exact, single-serving portions so overeating becomes physically impossible. Furthermore, you can leverage the immense power of an accountability partner. As tribal creatures, we care deeply about our reputation. Create a strict social contract with someone you deeply respect. Agree that if you fail to execute your good habit, or if you succumb to your bad habit, you have to pay them $50 immediately, or you have to post a public admission of failure on your social media. Suddenly, the bad habit is no longer a private, victimless crime. It carries an immediate, painful, and highly visible social cost. The behavior instantly becomes intensely unsatisfying. However, even with the most perfectly designed systems, the tightest environment, and the strictest accountability, you are still a human being. You will inevitably experience setbacks. The absolute most critical aspect of long-term discipline is relapse prevention. When you stumble, you must be fiercely vigilant against a devastating psychological trap known as the what the hell effect. The what the hell effect describes the moment when a minor slip-up cascades into a total catastrophic collapse. It is the diabolical, flawed logic that says, well, I already ate one piece of candy and ruined my diet for the day, so what the hell, I might as well eat the entire box. It is a dangerous cognitive distortion that transforms a tiny mistake into a massive failure, completely destroying your momentum. The difference between those who achieve absolute mastery and those who constantly fail is not that masters never stumble. It is that they recover instantly. When a highly disciplined person makes a mistake, they view it as a single, isolated data point, not an identity crisis. They adhere rigidly to the golden rule of habit formation. Never miss twice. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the beginning of a new, destructive habit. When you fall off the path, do not wallow in guilt. Discipline is not about achieving absolute perfection. It is about relentless course correction. By making your bad habits completely invisible, highly unattractive, incredibly difficult, and deeply unsatisfying, you construct an impenetrable fortress around your goals, ensuring that even when you do fall, you never stay down. As we move beyond the foundational 4 laws of behavior change, we enter the realm of true mastery. Building a habit is only the first phase of the journey. To truly trick your brain into liking discipline and achieving lifelong excellence, we must adopt advanced strategies and profound mindset shifts. We must understand the delicate, complex balance of human motivation and the hidden architecture of long-term success. One of the most critical advanced concepts in this entire framework is known as the Goldilocks rule. Human beings love a challenge, but our brains are extremely particular about the exact level of that challenge. If a task is too easy, you will quickly become completely bored. Your brain will shut off, your attention will drift, and you will abandon the habit simply because it offers absolutely no neurological stimulation. Conversely, if a task is overwhelmingly difficult and far beyond your current capabilities, you will experience devastating failure. Your motivation will plummet, your ego will be bruised, and you will quit out of pure frustration. The Goldilocks rule states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the absolute edge of their current abilities. Not too hard, not too easy, just right. To maintain lifelong discipline, you must constantly search for this precise sweet spot. As your skills improve, your habits must evolve. If you lift the exact same weight in the gym every single day for a year, your body will completely stop growing. You must systematically increase the challenge just enough to stay highly engaged, but not so much that you break your spirit. This delicate dance of constant, slight improvement is what keeps the brain flooded with dopamine and deeply, intensely invested in the process. However, even if you consistently find the perfect level of difficulty, you will inevitably encounter the most dangerous and deceptive phase of any pursuit, the plateau of latent potential. We have been heavily conditioned by modern society to expect linear, immediate progress. We falsely believe that if we put in a certain amount of effort today, we should see an immediate, directly proportional result tomorrow. But the most powerful outcomes of any compounding process are always delayed. When you start a new discipline, you often put in massive amounts of exhausting work for weeks, or even months, without seeing any tangible, visible results. This creates what is known as the valley of disappointment. It is right here, in this invisible, frustrating valley, that the vast majority of people surrender. They think their systems are failing. They think they lack the right genetics or the right talent. But their systems are not failing at all. The results are simply being stored. James Clear uses the brilliant analogy of an ice cube sitting on a table in a freezing cold room. The room is 25 degrees. You slowly, painstakingly heat it up. 26, 27, 28. The ice cube does not change. 29, 30. Still nothing happens. Then you finally hit 32 degrees, and the ice begins to melt. A single 1-degree shift seemingly unlocked a massive transformation, but it was the accumulated, invisible work of all the previous temperature increases that actually created the breakthrough. Your disciplined work is never wasted. It is simply being stored. When you finally break through the plateau, the outside world will call it an overnight success, completely blind to the silent, grueling years of discipline that preceded it. To ensure that your stored potential eventually leads to true mastery, you must pair your automated habits with deliberate practice. The hidden danger of a habit is automaticity. When a behavior becomes completely automatic, you stop thinking about it. While this beautifully reduces the friction of starting, it also means you stop paying close attention to small errors. You stop improving and you start stagnating. Mastery requires you to remain consciously engaged. Habits plus deliberate practice equals mastery. Therefore, you must implement a strict system of regular review and reflection. You cannot just blindly execute daily routines for years on end without checking the compass. You must step back periodically and ruthlessly, honestly assess your systems. Are you actually getting better? Or are you just repeating the exact same mistakes with greater and greater efficiency? By scheduling a weekly or monthly review of your habits, you maintain conscious control over your automatic behaviors. You force your ego to accept feedback, allowing you to fine-tune your approach and shatter the invisible ceilings of your own potential. This continuous refinement ultimately drives us back to the deepest, most profound psychological shift of all: the deep dive into identity-based habits. As you accumulate more and more disciplined actions, your internal narrative begins to fundamentally shift. The ultimate goal of all this psychological architecture is not merely to perform an isolated action, but to completely forge a new self-perception. Your habits are not just things you do. They are the undeniable physical evidence of exactly who you are. The goal is not to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. True behavior change is identity change. When your habits become a core part of your identity, you no longer have to force yourself to act. The discipline becomes as natural and unconscious as breathing, because to not perform the habit would be a painful violation of your own self-image. You shed the skin of your old, undisciplined self, and you step fully into a new reality. This massive identity shift is fueled by the immense power of small wins. Every single time you choose the disciplined path, no matter how impossibly tiny the action seems, you cast a definitive vote for your new identity. You are accumulating undeniable evidence that you are someone who does the hard work. Through the power of neuroplasticity, these small wins physically rewire your brain. They compound over time, building an unshakable foundation of self-respect and unstoppable momentum. You completely stop viewing yourself as a weak victim of your impulses, and you start viewing yourself as the sovereign architect of your reality. And this is where the true beauty of these principles reveals itself. These strategies do not just apply to waking up early or eating vegetables. They are the universal operating instructions for profound, limitless personal growth. When you learn how to trick your brain into craving discipline, you gain the absolute ability to master any domain of human life. You can apply these exact same 4 laws to building massive financial wealth, forging deep, emotionally resonant relationships, or cultivating unshakable, bulletproof mental health. By mastering the micro-elements of your daily routine, you seize total control of the macro trajectory of your entire existence. You stop reacting to the chaos of the world, and you start intentionally, deliberately designing your ultimate destiny, one small, perfectly executed habit at a time. We have reached the absolute culmination of this deep exploration into the architecture of human behavior. Together, we have traveled far beyond the surface-level motivational advice that so frequently litters the modern self-improvement space. We have journeyed deep into the ancient, survival-driven neurobiology of your own brain, and we have systematically dismantled the deeply pervasive myth that discipline is merely a matter of brute force willpower. If there is one singular, liberating truth you take away from this entire series, let it be this realization. You are not broken, and you are not inherently lazy. The profound frustration you have felt, the endless cycles of starting and stopping, the overwhelming guilt of failing to stick to your loftiest goals, none of that is a moral failing on your part. You have simply been playing a massively complex, high-stakes game of psychological chess against your own biology, and you have been doing it without ever being taught the rules. You have been attempting to force a nervous system designed for ancient survival to operate flawlessly in a modern, chaotic world of infinite distraction. But right now, you finally possess the blueprint. You understand the profound paradigm shift that changes absolutely everything. Discipline is not about brutal deprivation. It is not about endless suffering or white-knuckling your way through a miserable existence. True discipline is about intelligent, intentional design. It is about deeply understanding the mechanical language of your own mind and deliberately shaping your daily reality so that the path of least resistance naturally and effortlessly aligns with your highest aspirations. Let us briefly and powerfully anchor the core principles we have uncovered into your active memory. To build the infallible systems that will carry you toward your ultimate human potential, you must master the 4 laws of behavior change. First, you must make it wildly obvious. Step up and become the deliberate architect of your physical environment, leaving glaring visual cues that command your attention and completely eliminate the terrible strategy of relying on your fragile memory. Second, you must make it deeply attractive. Learn to manipulate your dopamine system by bundling the difficult things you need to do with the pleasurable things you crave, and reframing your internal dialogue from a mindset of obligation to a mindset of opportunity. Third, you must make it incredibly easy. Ruthlessly strip away the friction that stands between you and your desired action. Scale down your grandest ambitions to the 2-minute rule, mastering the foundational art of showing up before you ever attempt to optimize the actual performance. And fourth, you must make it deeply satisfying. Artificially manufacture immediate, visceral rewards for your delayed return habits. Track your progress meticulously and celebrate every tiny victory, because what is immediately rewarded is neurologically repeated. Conversely, to dismantle the destructive, parasitic routines that sabotage your potential, you must perfectly invert these exact same 4 laws. Make your bad habits completely invisible by ruthlessly scrubbing your environment clean of their specific triggers. Make them intensely unattractive by exposing the long-term, devastating damage they inflict upon your future self. Make them incredibly difficult by building massive, insurmountable walls of friction between you and the destructive behavior. And finally, make them deeply unsatisfying by utilizing strict commitment devices and harsh accountability partners to drag the future pain of your terrible actions right into the present moment. When you apply these elegant laws with unwavering consistency, you will experience a breathtaking shift in your own identity. You will stop identifying as someone who is constantly struggling and failing to change, and you will begin to identify as the sovereign creator of your own destiny. You will realize that your life is not a fixed script written by your past, but a dynamic, highly malleable system waiting for your conscious, deliberate direction. This brings us to a critical, life-defining juncture. The knowledge you have acquired today is incredibly powerful, but knowledge without real-world action is entirely useless. I am issuing you a direct call to action right now. What is one exceptionally small, seemingly insignificant habit that you can deliberately make slightly more obvious, attractive, easy, or satisfying before you go to sleep tonight? Pick one tiny action. Perhaps it is leaving a book on your pillow so you are forced to read one single page. And simultaneously, reflect heavily on that one persistent bad habit that has been holding you back. How can you strategically make that specific behavior completely invisible or incredibly difficult to execute today? Take back your personal power by altering your physical environment right now. If you want to dive even deeper into the mechanics of these laws and completely rewire your brain, I highly encourage you to read the foundational text that inspired this exploration, Atomic Habits by James Clear. It is an absolute masterpiece of behavioral psychology. As you move forward, carry this final thought with you. The path to extraordinary results is never paved with massive leaps of faith. It is always paved with the quiet, relentless repetition of entirely ordinary habits. Greatness is not a sudden event. It is a highly refined, fiercely protected process. When you fall in love with that daily process, start incredibly small, and stay fiercely consistent, you will inevitably watch your entire life transform. You are not lazy. You just needed a better system. Thank you profoundly for taking this deep dive and joining us on this incredible journey today. If this exploration expanded your mind and provided you with tangible tools to elevate your life, please take a brief moment to like this video, subscribe to Elevated Within, and share this vital knowledge with someone who needs to hear it. The algorithms want to keep us distracted, but together, we can build an unstoppable community dedicated to true mastery and personal growth. Please leave a comment below sharing the very first tiny habit you are going to implement or the one bad habit you are going to make invisible today. We read every single comment, and we genuinely want to see your public commitments. Until next time, remember that the immense power to change your life is already inside you. Now, go meticulously design the system to let it out.